Hey BookTube, it's Charlie from Reader Turned Writer, and today I want to share some tips on how to read more classics. I did want to preface this video by saying I am by no means an expert. I did not major in literature or anything like that. I have read quite a few classics, and I find that I usually enjoy most classics that I try to read, and that I'm able to finish most of the classics that I attempt to read as well. And so I just wanted to share some tips here in case you want to read more classics. And I hope you don't feel like you have to read classics, because reading other types of books never makes you a worse reader or not as good of a reader or not as smart or anything like that. I do believe that reading classics can be very beneficial. Classics are timeless for a reason. They generally have really beautiful prose and language. They teach us moral lessons and help us to become better people, and are usually very inspiring stories. And so I do believe that classics can benefit our lives in a very rich and beautiful way if we can find a way to enjoy them. Tip number 1, read more classics. I have found that the more I've read classics, the more I enjoy reading other classics. I think it just helps because you get used to kind of the language that they use, because a lot of times classics do use a different kind of language. The more you read in general, the easier it is going to be to read more later. That's a very general principle. It's one of the reasons that reading aloud to your kids is so good, is because it gives them context. They learn more words and they're used to the language of reading and everything. So then when they go to read on their own, they have kind of a head start over all the kids whose parents didn't read to them, because they have all these words and vocabulary and context for what they're reading currently. The same applies with you in classics. My second tip is to look up words. If you really don't understand what something means, you can always stop and look up words, even if it's just on your phone really fast. I feel like nowadays it's a lot easier to look up words that we don't understand in books because of technology. We always have a computer or a phone or something right by us most of the time, and so we don't need to keep some sort of dictionary right there, or even own a dictionary, because we can just Google it. Tip number 3 is to know the story and the characters beforehand. Whether this is by looking up online a synopsis or just like watching the movie, I found that if I'm not trying to focus on like, oh, what's going on? I have no idea what's going on, then I'm able to get more out of it because I know the story, so I'm able to follow along better, and then I'm able to see past the story as well. And the more times I read the book, the easier this is too. For example, Jane Austen. I understand most Jane Austen books really well by now because I've read the book so many times and seen the movie so many times that I'm able to understand what's going on just because I already know what's going on, and so then I'm able to look deeper into the book and get more out of it and enjoy it more. Tip number 4 is to try different styles or authors. There are a lot of different types of classics out there. Just as an example, there's going to be a big difference between reading To Kill a Mockingbird and Les Mis. And I know this is like kind of an extreme example because the size is a huge factor, but even if To Kill a Mockingbird was as long as Les Mis, it would still be a way different experience and probably slightly easier for us because To Kill a Mockingbird is a little bit more modern. Maybe you like Jane Austen, maybe you like Charles Dickens, maybe you like older classics, maybe you like more modern classics that were written after the 1900s even, and that's fine. You can start with those or stick with those, but a lot of times if you start reading those, you're going to be able to move backwards a little bit and understand the language easier in older classics than you would if you just jumped right into Charles Dickens. But really, a lot of authors have different styles, and a lot of time periods have different types of writing, and so if you feel frustrated with one classic or you think you don't like classics because of the ones that you've read, you should do a little bit of research and see if you can find one that you actually do enjoy. My 5th tip is to talk with others about it. This is whether you're just loving the classic or whether you're struggling with the classic. Talking with somebody who's also read it and who knows it very well can be really helpful. You could easily catch their passion for it, and it will get you past whatever problem that you're having with understanding, because they can help you understand it, and they might even be able to take you and watch the movie with you or something like that to help you get through it. That's how I got through Great Expectations. My tip number 6 is just to understand that you're not going to get everything the first time, and that it's just going to take you longer to read through it. Classics do take longer to read because they take a lot more of our brain power to understand, generally speaking, than something like Harry Potter. And that's okay. It's okay to take a book and take a long time to finish it. There's nothing wrong with only reading one book in a month if it's a giant classic that you've been wanting to get to for a long time. And going back to reread classics really helps you get more out of them. I know a lot of the books that I read in school totally went over my head when I was in high school, but then I grew up a little bit and was able to reread them and actually really like them. That really happened for me with A Separate Peace. I did not understand why in the world we were reading that in high school, but then when I was an adult and I was pregnant with my first child, I got this and reread it and fell in love with it, and now it's a book that I really, really love. My last tip is to simply read your classic a little bit every day while you're reading other books. If you're a person who doesn't really like to read 2 books at once or more than 1 book at once, you could still try this and just see if you like it with classics. I found it has worked really well for me. I'll keep a classic book in my nightstand. Right now I'm reading The Art of War by Sun Tzu, and next up is going to be Uncle Tom's Cabin. And I just read a little bit every night before bed, which really helps me get sleepy. It helps me get that little bit of reading in every day. I don't feel like I have to read a ton. But then during the day I feel like I can read other books that aren't classics that I really enjoy as well. So then I never feel overloaded or get tired of the classic or feel like I can't finish it, because I just do it a little bit at a time every single day, and I'm able to read other books that I also really want to get to faster than I would finish the classic, and so it really, really is helpful to me. My very last tip is to find easier classics. And this kind of goes along with finding a different style, but it's not so much that you enjoy it, it's just finding classics that you feel like you can understand to just get you going. Some really good ones. Newer classics like To Kill a Mockingbird or A Separate Peace. Both of these are pretty easy to understand what's going on, especially To Kill a Mockingbird because the language is just a lot more modern. And they're both really, really interesting stories. They talk about really important concepts and ideas and historical events, and so both of these would be really good classics to get started with. Some other really easy classics to get through are children's classics. They're written for a younger audience, and so they naturally have easier writing in them. The Tale of Despereaux is a more modern children's classic, and it is adorable. The story is really good, and you could read it with slightly older children at the same time, and you would both get a lot out of it, and it is a really cute story. Charlotte's Web is obviously a children's classic that we've all probably seen the movie for, but it is my favorite children's classic. It is so cute. The imagery in it just takes you back to your childhood and your summers and just makes you want to lounge around in the grass and go visit a farm, and you fall in love with the characters, and is so easy to understand. I actually read this with my 3-year-old, and I know she didn't get everything out of it, but she really, really enjoyed it. And of course it has some pictures, and she really liked the pictures in it and everything, and she loved the idea that it was about a pig. And so even very young children can understand this, and it's really not a long read, it's a pretty short one. That's the other benefit of a children's classic, is they're generally shorter. My 2 other favorites, Heidi by Johanna Spyri, and this one is a little bit harder to understand because of when it was written, but the story is so beautiful. It has been one of my favorites since I was a child. I used to love the movie too, and I reread it as an adult and I fell in love with it all over again, and it is definitely one that if you're struggling with classics but you want that feel of the classic, you know, simplicity and nature and a beautiful story and good morals, this is a fantastic one to pick up. And of course The Wizard of Oz, which is more odd and strange, but it was definitely an interesting read and definitely not hard to understand, and taught morals and was funny, and is a great one to pick up as well. Those are my tips for reading more classics and enjoying them and actually finishing them. Do you have any other tips? Share them with me in the comments below if you do. Also share your favorite classic. Thanks for watching my video, and I will see you in the next one.